course, and it's the end of working week for most of us, or many of us, and we probably should be happy. I imagine you are. But finding happiness at work is a challenge for a lot of us. Motivating employees, motivating yourself, your boss. Well, it's been a subject of countless studies. I spoke to finance professor Alex Edmans, an expert on a wide range of workplace issues, and my question to him was, isn't it obvious that paying workers more, well, would make them happier?
It's not obvious. You might think, well, if isn't it obvious that companies do better if their workers are happier? But it's not, because one way that you can make your workers happy is you just pay them a huge amount and then just give them loads of holidays and you just don't work them hard enough. And indeed, the traditional way that people thought about managing workers was that employee satisfaction was a bad thing, that a company where the workers were too satisfied was just a fluffy company which was distracted from the bottom line. But in fact, my results are somewhat surprising in that they show that actually, even though it is costly to increase employee welfare, this ultimately benefits shareholders in the long run. So you don't face a trade-off.
Hang on a second. You're saying that some companies actually, it's a goal to have their employees not be happy?
So that's not the explicit goal. So their goal is to keep costs under control. So their goal might be to not overpay your workers. It's also to try to get as much output of your workers as possible. Let's think back to Ford. He designed the assembly line. Why was the assembly line such a success? That forced workers to keep up with the pace of production. That made sure that they didn't slack off. And indeed, a lot of the traditional management theories were ways in which you made sure that workers did not slack off, and therefore employee satisfaction was seen as a sign of slacking, was seen as something counterproductive to shareholder value.
Let's just say you and I are the bosses of a company, and we want to make our employees feel valued. We pay them well. They have the normal benefits that they would have working at any other type of competitor. So how are we going to make this different for them? How are we going to make them feel valued?
So it's not just things such as those extrinsic rewards, but it might be involving them in say, decision-making. So it's the extent to which they're able to make their voice heard. It's the extent to which you communicate to them credibly. So it could be, if there's a downturn and you communicate to them that their jobs are safe, do they believe you or do they not? It could be simple things just like senior management walking around the shop floor. So Marks and Spencer, a UK high street store, that was extremely famous for having a great emphasis on employee welfare, not just because of the benefits, but because senior management really cared about what rank and file employees thought.
Let me just give you one example. Starbucks, for example.
Yeah.
Howard Schultz, the leader there, has said it many times that people over profits. And we hear that often, but he actually puts his money where his mouth is. I mean, profits do come secondary, and the company's wildly profitable, by the way, but yet the employees there, which they call partners, they feel a sense of, it's stronger than an employee-manager relationship. It's stronger than just a partnership. There's that bond. How do you describe that, and how do you get that? Does it take a lot of time, or is it something that happens because he's a great leader?
So this is something which is extremely difficult. It does take a lot of time. So the traditional way managers thought about their workers is they would tell workers what to do, workers would follow. And that was easy, say, in the 19th century when you had factories, right? What you would do to motivate workers, you just count the number of widgets they produce and you pay them per widget. This is really difficult nowadays. In a startup, what are you supposed to do as an employee? You're supposed to be innovative. You're supposed to be evangelical about the company to outsiders. You can't actually incentivize this through a contract. You can't measure those outputs. So instead, the way to motivate your employees is to make them aligned with the organization so that they actually want to do good for the firm, even if it's not explicitly rewarded in the contract. How do you achieve this? Well, this is by viewing employees as partners of the organization, through involving them in decision-making, through management recognizing their needs as a person, rather than just as an input to the production process.
Yeah.
And because these things are difficult, this is why companies which do treat their workers well can develop sustainable competitive advantage. This is not something that it's easy for a competitor to replicate.